NordicTrack's done a really good job with our hiking tour guides and their cameras where the treadmill, when you're walking, if you're walking up a hill, it will incline up. When you're walking down a hill, it'll decline down if you're walking on a flat trail. I don't feel like when I'm doing it that I'm in my basement in Baltimore. I feel like I'm out in nature.
Welcome to our last session. We'll start off by introducing our panelists here today, and then I'll give a little bit of a foundation for this topic. So we'll go down the line here. Matt, if you want to start us off.
Sure. I'm Mat Gillin. I'm with Bristol Development. We're based in Nashville, Tennessee. We are a ground-up Class A multifamily developer. Do about 2 or 3 starts a year, and we focus in the Southeast. We third-party everything out to design, construction, and property management, so we remain very lean, but we have experts in-house on all of those.
We got Jeff and Cody from Resideo, so I'll have them introduce themselves and talk about their specialties, because they definitely both bring some very unique experience to the table.
Perfect, thanks. So I'm Jeff Holt with Resideo, formerly Honeywell. So we still brand under the Honeywell Home name, First Alert End or BRK. But my role is National Account Manager, focused on multifamily, so owner, operator, developer, working with design teams, getting our products spec'd in, talked about the features, benefits, et cetera, but then also focused on the property management side with different MRO teams for maintenance and repair.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Cody Kaufman, also with Resideo, representing the Honeywell Home. I've been with the company for about 9 years. I live in Baltimore, Maryland, and I have sort of some unique experiences and background to kind of lend my anecdotal opinion around health and wellness. So even though Jeff and I are from the same company today, Jeff will talk about some of our internal strategies and products of how we deal with health and wellness environmentally, like inside a living space. Whereas everything I'll talk about today will be, more abstract, broader ideas, more unrelated to our company and our products.
So as we look at the topic, this is one that certainly has evolved over the last 5 years. The pandemic certainly made a society as a whole focus a little bit more on our health and where we live and as we interact with other people. But I think it's also fair to say that this is being driven by perhaps the two bookends of the generations that we have in these properties. You've got Gen Z that cares very much about the experience and is very conscious about health and wellness. And then we've got the baby boomers that are retiring and are also kind of focused on that. It feels like it's starting to kind of bleed into the middle. So the first question I want to pose is we kind of look at how do we define health and wellness, and I've got a proposed kind of Venn diagram up here of 4 different areas and what some of the technology and features where they might overlap. But I'll pose it to Cody first from that abstract view. How do you define health and wellness in the context of multifamily housing today?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I like this chart. For me personally, I think there'll be a slide later in the deck about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but you start thinking about like what people need in their own life. And so the way I define wellness personally, my kind of 5 pillars are sleep, hydration, diet, exercise, activity, and then the 5th one, which is social and community. So that's like when I think about it, in my own life, am I living balanced? Am I happy? Am I doing well? Am I accomplishing the things that I want to accomplish? I really try to focus on those things. And I know it's like you're sitting there thinking like, what does that have anything to do with multifamily? But if we can start thinking differently and designing our spaces and our buildings to elicit these things that help people live a calm, more social life, where maybe they're eating better, hydrating better. I think it leads to broader happiness. It leads to higher retention. It makes the property more attractive, and I'll get into some of that a little bit later. So just starting with kind of like the sleep and hydration piece. I took the picture on the right, I actually took in the hotel a couple nights ago, and I checked in. You commonly see these in airports, but I often wonder why they don't exist more broadly in other buildings. So when I think about those 5 pillars I laid out, I think about in the United States today, what are we lacking the most? What are most people lacking of the 5 pillars? It's probably like lacking hydration and lacking sleep. Like we're busy, we're moving from meetings to meetings. We all have families and doctor's appointments and things for our kids and our family, and we're constantly attached to digital devices. And so sleep is for me like a big thing I think all of us can improve on. And if we can think of ways to design the multifamily living space to elicit more sleep. One idea I have, and I don't know if this is code protective, but like in our house, we always put up blackout curtains, and my wife and I, we always sleep with blackout masks. There's actually a lot of research that shows how much sleep quality can improve with blocking out your windows and using a blackout sleep mask. So just think about it in the way that you design the buildings, design the rooms, including curtains or potentially shades that help people sleep. And then the hydration. You go into a lot of hotels, you walk in, they've got a big jug of water with cucumbers and different fruits in it. When you're a resident or in your building, if there's water available or places in the hallway to fill up their water bottle like you have at the airport, I think it's part of that overall wellness experience for them living a kind of a happy, healthy life. And I think that certainly applies to whether it's the baby boomers, or the younger generation. Moving on to diet and exercise, it's hard. Like I travel a lot for work, and like finding a healthy, nutrient dense meal is tough sometimes. There's a lot of fast food options out there. People are always on the go, but in multifamily, if you can place your building in proximity to healthy eating locations, or even offer healthy food options in your lobby or downstairs, depending on the development, I think it goes a long way. If you look at a couple of the fast casual restaurants out there, we've seen how well restaurants like Chipotle and Cava have done in the last 5 years. It's sort of no wonder why their growth has exploded relative to like maybe a McDonald's or a Burger King. It's because people really need or yearn for healthy, nutrient-dense food, amidst a kind of busy, chaotic life. And so, it's just something to sort of think about. And then we're going to talk about the exercise piece, activity piece a little bit later, but there's also lastly the social and community part. So like looking back in my 20s and 30s, like I made most of my friends, my wife and I, like through our dog, number one. So like we had a dog, a yellow lab, and we made a lot of friends on the West Coast and the East Coast, like at the dog park. So just thinking about how people live, like who's your target market in your building? Do they have pets? Do they have kids? Maybe think about offering like a doggy play space or potentially like a tot lot playground. We know how fast pickleball has exploded in this country. So thinking about people's hobbies in your target market, putting your building close to a park, or even putting a small pickleball court on site could be a huge amenity for both the younger and older generations. And then just having some social events as well. Think about senior living facilities. I have a grandparent in the senior living facility, and there's always events going on like bingo night and trivia night and things like that. So the more that you can build that sense of community. But the reality is, like, even though we're always connected on our phones and always living through social media, I think overall the world is more lonely than ever. The older generations and even the younger generations really lack like one-on-one, just human to human interaction a lot of times. And so the more you can foster that sense of community in your buildings, I think the better off everybody will be.
Great foundation looking at that pyramid. I'll kind of turn it over to Matt next to talk about, from your viewpoint, how do you define it?
Yeah, when I first thought of it, the word that popped to my head was longevity. But it got me thinking that there's actually, I think, a more accurate word that was adopted a couple years ago called health span, which is not necessarily how long can you live, it's how long can you be in this healthy band. So, as you can see here, we've got a couple ways to facilitate that. The physical one's pretty black and white. You improve your biometrics, but the mental one is, call it like a war on stress. When we amenitize our spaces to produce mentally healthy results, mostly as it relates to social well-being, we're actively working to cut down the stress levels of our residents, and we find that that will have improvements to their health span, which is a fun phrase I like to use.
Jeff, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think Cody summed it up, and from where I guess my beliefs stand as a from a personal perspective, but from what we do at Resideo, you're looking at the chart there from a mental aspect, having that smart thermostat and things we do very well, being able to control the space that we're in a majority of the time, right? Coming home to a comfort level that is set for the summer months, the winter months, right? Is the humidity right? Is it too humid? Can I get the sleep that I need to wake up refreshed in the morning, right? So, creating those environments with the products that are available to the contractors and the developers, and actually implementing them to create that environment to capitalize on all the things that Cody mentioned is really key. And obviously, at the end of the day, it comes down to costs. But the fact that all of you are putting in a thermostat on a very base level, right? Increased cost on a smart thermostat that can do a bunch of different things that can define health and wellness and create a better environment isn't that much, right? So, for a resident looking at, a couple different apartments, and they're going to pay, I don't know, we'll call it $100 more a month, but they can have full control of their unit, knowing when, the heat's on, the AC's on, the humidity's out of control, and actually have control to customize that is really welcoming to that person, right? Because everyone is app driven these days. And if they don't have control over those environments, it may be a miss on that part, right? So just to think about extending of what we're already doing from a control and smart thermostat perspective, right? And then if you think about the air quality side of things, right? So new construction as it relates to VOCs and different scenarios like that, right? So whether it's the paint, whether it's the carpets, right? How do we know what's going on in that, and how do we clear that up, right? So to think about things like ventilation. Coming home to a smelly apartment when the neighbor's cooking some Mexican food or Chinese or burnt a piece of toast, right? And it kind of seeps into your unit.
The burnt popcorn, man, that's what gets
Yeah, absolutely, right? So being aware of what those scenarios are and cleaning that up, just so we can always feel welcome in the environment where we make our own for so much time.
So I mentioned the pandemic, and as we've looked over the 5 years since then, what are some of the the things you've talked about? Which ones are shifting the most as a result of what we learned from the pandemic, or how the public is reacting to the pandemic?
Well, I think I would take that side that's mental, and I would expand that. I think that has, I think the definitions are the same as they were pre-pandemic, but the pandemic acted like a salt shaker, and it just brought out, and low-lying stress was amplified through the pandemic, and I think everybody was convinced that how important mental health is, and much more so than they were pre-pandemic. So I would adjust that a little and call the mental just slightly bigger than the physical.
My thoughts are in the senior community during the pandemic, a lot of people, some of those folks were wearing masks and staying isolated for a lot longer than they needed to be or they should have been. Obviously, it depends on their personal health situation. But, I think it's important to get those people back out and socializing again at the same time. For the younger generation, for those kids that are like, in their 20s and looking for, their first apartment and first job, maybe in a new city, where they've graduated college and they've moved out and they've found a job and they're in a new place, but they don't know anybody. So how do we get them to meet friends? How do we get them involved in activities? We want their building, right, where they live, to not just be a dwelling, right? You want it to be give them a sense of community there. I've lived in a few places in my life with a very strong sense of community. I've lived in, when I was in college, I lived in the most densely populated college community in the United States, and I love that sense of community. I live in Baltimore now. My family and friends come visit us. We live in a really cool pocket. My brother always tells me, he comes and visits from San Diego, and he's like, you live in Sesame Street, man. Like, everybody knows each other. Everything's walkable. So we'll live in a multifamily building. We're living like a city townhouse or city row home, but you still want to create an environment where people are able to socialize, feel comfortable, feel happy, and be able to make friends with neighbors. So I think that's the most important part, is just fostering the social aspect of it.
Yeah, and I would agree on that. And I'll share a story that actually just happened this last weekend. So my son plays travel basketball. He's 17, going to be a senior, right? So you talk about the mental awareness, the hey, let's stay in our room, let's close the door, let's be on our phones, right? So creating those environments to basically put the phone down, to be active, to interact with, the three of us sitting there, you guys all at your tables. So we went to dinner as a basketball team, and the coach said, kids walked in, they're all on their phones, nobody's talking, right? It's a new team for all these kids. They weren't saying a word, right? And coach said, hey, give me your phones, right? Put the phones down, all the boys are at a table, no conversation, right? So that's the world that these young adults or soon to be adults live in, right? So how can we as adults, developers, manufacturers change that environment? So some of the things Cody was mentioning kind of allude to that, creating those environments. So as they took the phones, the one coach looks back to the table and says, boys, you can talk to each other, right? And from that point on, for the rest of the evening, like the conversation started, their confidence grew, right? They created that environment on something so simple of taking that phone away to understand, different people, different lifestyles, who likes what, right? They were forced to talk. So when you think about, health and wellness in the multifamily space, right? Having those trivia nights, having, we'll call it potluck dinners. I don't know what you want to call them, right? But having those different events to force folks to interact in a way that they're maybe not used to or not comfortable with can go a really long way. More so after COVID, right? So once COVID hit, right, like I look at my son or even just our family in general, right? Like everything was kind of defined. There wasn't things happening outside of our home. You maybe felt lonely, the emotional stress, all of that just starts to build, right? So, we as a public sector need to do a better job of creating those environments for everybody involved to get outside of that, maybe that funk that still exists.
I'll share just a couple observations I've been able to make between my family and then also the university students that I've interacted with the last 7 or 8 years. Certainly from the point of view of learning and working remote and seeing how this generation of students, the students that are just finishing up college right now, they got introduced to online learning, in high school and then have gone through hybrid throughout college. One of the things that's really interesting to note is that they have been able to learn more about themselves, and some of them have recognized, I learn better and I want to work with other people. They recognize they need that interaction. But there's a subsection, and I say it's probably about 40% of the students who have recognized, I can learn well online and that fits my personality better. And when I have the option to learn online, and I imagine it will translate as they're looking for work, they're going to look for work that is remote because they know that fits them. And I think that's going to translate into what they're looking for in terms of housing and being able to have shared spaces where they can do remote work. The second from teenagers, which I observed, is that pre-pandemic with our church youth group, I get asked to be the DJ for the dances. And the dances prior pandemic was, 5% dancing in the center and another 95% are wallflowers outside. It was amazing to see the shift that after the pandemic, when we first had a youth dance again, it was 95% dancing, 5% wallflowers. And as you look at history and we look at the 1918 pandemic and then what happened afterwards, the roaring 20s, I really have to question whether or not we're going to see that same repeat, is that that generation is, when given the chance, when you get them away from their phones and set up that opportunity, that they crave that social interaction because of that time that they were isolated. And I think that'll translate into a lot we're seeing.
And I'll jump in there. So I love that reference of 40% identified that they actually do better working online or learning online. And so from a developer's perspective, we don't design the extrovert community. We don't design the introvert community. We have to design a community that appeals to everybody. And finding that balance is a challenge. But I think you also have to recognize, like you said, like you call it half and half. Like there's all kinds out there, and we want to be attractive to everybody. And we talk about like generational differences that kind of come with post-pandemic changes. This idea, and we've talked about it before, of being alone together is definitely a thing. So we create co-working spaces that are all glass doors. They're big, thick glass, so they're kind of sound insulated so folks can work. But they just turn their chair around and they can see into the club space and they can see other people and they get a sense of comfort from that without actually having to interact, which is kind of funny, but it's very valuable and it's something that our residents are very attracted to.
So I'm going to pull up a chart here it's going to look like similar to some of the other ones we've had in the previous sessions of looking at the various classes and looking at the wellness features and giving, this is authoritative, but probably some trends of where we're seeing a lot of adoption, where there are some emerging or occasional use of that technology, and where it's pretty rare and where there's low priority. And of course, in affordable, it's not everything we're going to talk about today necessarily is going to work in affordable, but there are some things that definitely should be on your radar if you're in that class. If you're in the market rate, more things that are applicable. And then certainly as you're getting into Class A and Class A plus, that most of the stuff we're talking about is starting to become table stakes for that particular class. And if you haven't adopted that, be looking at it. Question I have leading from here will go to Matt. How are you seeing health and wellness strategies differing across these classes? And do you feel like there's anything that doesn't match up with what you're viewing and experiencing, or just what you've been experiencing?
So I can't speak to Class B. It's not a industry we're in, but we do have a LIHTC HUD deal in Johnson City. So we're on the Class A side and we're on the low income side. And I think that the approaches are more similar than you would think as far as what our goals are. We want healthy residents, both on the affordable and the Class A side. Healthy residents pay healthy rents, which makes it a healthy investment for our partners. But at the same time, in the affordable, it's just as important for our affordable folks to be in an environment that fosters health too. The difference, I think, is, so they call it like the starter pack for health and wellness on affordable. It's going to have a fitness center. It's going to have some sort of like leasing or club room where you can have a community event. Those are pretty much going to be standard on a new construction affordable deal. What differentiates Class A is probably more so towards the mental health and the hobby style amenities that we can offer because they have an upside on ROI. So for example, our Class A property, we have one in Huntsville, and it's got the fitness center and it's got the leasing, but it's also got a dedicated club room, it's got a dedicated yoga room, gift wrap station, lending room, makerspace, laundry lounge, probably some more that I'm not thinking of. Those are all things that I think are unique to what Class A can offer for residents who like to socialize on a macro scale. You have the club, but then we also kind of join these little cliques. So we have a bike storage room that is actually a bike lounge. It's got a couch, it's got a TV. So if you're into biking, go hang out with like 5 of your friends at the community in the bike lounge. That's something that I think differentiates Class A from affordable. And I think we can do more work on adding some of those to the affordable side. And I'm just being honest, I haven't put a lot of thought into it, but I'm convinced I need to.
And maybe a broader question to everyone as you're looking at the features here or other ones that aren't listed, which ones do you feel are becoming more standard versus ones that are remaining aspirational depending upon the market class?
Yeah, I mean, for me and what we do, I think obviously Class A, adding more features, bells and whistles around some of the things that we do in terms of air quality monitoring, et cetera, right? Obviously there's an expense associated with that, but as different codes come into play for like ventilating and how much, and depending on room size, et cetera, right? Is actually taking a deeper look at that and understanding, okay, hey, we're doing it at a bare minimum just based on code, right? Which is fine. It's X amount of turns per hour based on square footage, et cetera, right? But if the 3 of us are sitting in a room or the 4 of us and we're cooking and the vent, the humidity's rising and the VOCs are changing, right? How are we becoming aware of those, right? So basically just taking, I guess, full control of the environment that we're in to maintain a healthy living space or a healthy entertaining space, right? So some of the things that we can do on that is with our thermostats, right? Like I mentioned earlier, we're putting in a thermostat already, but let's take it to that next level. Let's understand what's either happening in the building, in the common areas, et cetera, but more importantly, what's happening in the living spaces, and let's adjust accordingly, right? So just creating that environment for the resident at that point.
So if you had a thermostat in the living area, that was enabled to be able to detect VOCs, and you're seeing a rise in that, what would a property owner, what could that trigger as a result?
Yeah, so like if you're looking at the thermostats there on the left side of the screen, right? So being able to see the VOCs within the building, understanding, hey, do we have occupancy in there based on some radar alerts, et cetera, saying, hey, there are people there, the VOCs are rising. What should we do? Well, a couple things you can, on a lower class, maybe affordable housing class B, you're gonna turn on a bath fan, a vent, open a window, et cetera, right? Let's get some fresh air in there. Some of the higher stuff that actually has true, fresh air dampers or true ventilating type systems in there, separate from the bath fan, which does obviously meet code for ventilating purposes. You basically integrate them, right? So, hey, the VOCs are getting to a point where, hey, let's just run another cycle of bringing fresh air in and pushing bad air out. Let's get it to a green standard, if you will, versus a yellow. Hey, the conditions aren't right on that front. More importantly, too, like, hey, if we are ventilating and we're required to do by code, if the air quality or the ambient air quality outside is actually not as clean as our air inside, why are we going to bring fresh air in, right? So you think about California, the wildfires, maybe New York City with the smogs, and it obviously fluctuates based on jet stream and weather conditions. But hey, what can, like we know it's not good out, but we can't really stop it in today's world, right? So with our smart thermostats and some of the things that we're doing moving forward is we're going to be able to control a lot more of that based on the feedback that we're getting in the environments around us, right? So it's, again, just taking it to that next level, which not only helps you, reduce equipment failures, obviously reduce energy savings of running certain times versus different times, but more importantly, creating that environment for your resident.
I think another use case that pops in, and Uri, who was on the panel yesterday, was sharing this. He had a condo in Miami, was gone for 2 weeks, had just turned off his AC completely because he was going to be gone. But because they had these type of sensors, humidity was an issue there. And there was an agreement in the lease. So like if your humidity gets above a certain amount, like we reserve the right to be able to go in and turn that back on. And so he got some emails and warning. They went in and turned that on. So if you've got properties where humidity is an issue, this can help you be preventative about that, which can have a significant ROI.
Yeah, and I think that's the bigger picture, right? Like we're talking about health and wellness, obviously from a building side and or resident side. But if you think about a building owner, property manager, maintenance side, the return of longevity, right? Like reducing the water leaks, reducing the potential for mold growth based on high humidity levels, right? And you talk about health and wellness just from a healthy body perspective, right? Having too much humidity can cause this and viruses and bacteria and all this other stuff, which could cause sicknesses. So if we can control that, right? Just walking into a place that I'm renting or living in for the next year, 2 years, 3 years, right? Knowing that it's always going to be controlled or we have control over that can go a long ways from deciding, am I going to pick property A or am I going to pick property B, right? Costs are going to be very similar in terms of the monthly rent, but hey, I know what I'm getting. And then obviously just, protecting your guys' investment from controlling those scenarios like, hey, is the window open and it's 85 degrees out and or did they shut the AC off? We're not getting, a way to bring down the humidity. It's just constantly increasing. Or did we go on vacation? We've seen it all, right? Like frozen pipes, right? The window's open, heat's turned off. How does the property know? And the screen there on the right is just a dashboarding feature to say, hey, you know what? Temperature's rising, we're out of range. What are we going to do? Let's be proactive. Let's get in front of some of these issues that are going to cost us a lot of time and money on the back end. But if we can be proactive, we can send an alert. We don't have to, be bothersome or intrusive to the resident. We can just send them an alert and say, hey, we need to get into your unit at the earliest convenience. We got to, look at your system, whatever it may be. So there's a lot of things out there that we can do. It's just opening up the eyes of everyone in this room to say, hey, how can we change what we're doing today?
With technology that's enabling the health and wellness for the resident, but also provide some additional ROI on the back end.
I'd like to back up a little bit. I enjoyed the reference to Yuri's humidity issue yesterday and the one you were just mentioning about smog. Like we have got to stop mandating stuff for health and wellness like that. And we talked about this leading up to it, but we do so much for health and wellness and we offer it as an amenity and we let the resident decide, is this attractive to you? If it's attractive to you, we get a lease. If it's not, they go to the next property. When we mandate something like fresh air intake, it adds, let's say, $150,000 to the property, that gets forced into rent and doesn't give the resident the opportunity to decide, is this important to you? Oh, and by the way, also creates issues like humidity, and if you're in a smog environment, like blanket mandating health and wellness is generally not a good idea. And as a developer, it's important to me to be able to choose what our residents actually care about and offer those as amenities.
All you regulators in the room.
They're with the insurance guys.
So looking at the physical wellness and some fitness focused technology, Matt, tell us a little bit about some of the fitness focused amenities and technologies you found that have proved pretty effective.
Yeah, so I'll start on the large scale. It starts with design for us. We want to create aesthetically pleasing spaces for fitness. So it's on there. So this is a fitness center that we designed and implemented in Jacksonville, Florida. It's a large standalone building, fitness building, lots of windows, overlooks a pond, and has a really beautiful ceiling detail in it. So when you walk into that, it's warm, it's inviting, but it's also energizing, and you have a good experience in
It's not dark and in the basement.
Right. It's not. So I was watching Creed on the flight here, and then the gyms in South Philly are a little dingy. It's not like that. So we want this, and then you can see there we partner with Technogym on every one of our fitness centers. And if you go to the next slide, Technogym it's not as professional of photos. These were taken yesterday. But there's some really cool stuff that Technogym's doing right now that is increasing the connectivity of fitness goals. So this is two separate spaces. The one on the left is our fitness, and then the room next to it is a dedicated yoga studio. But in the corner of that yoga studio, you can barely see it. There's two kiosks. One is a control station. It's in the corner, and the one next to it is called Technogym Checkup. That I talked about it a year ago, and we finally got it installed. I'm excited about it. That is a AI-based health assessment program that measures across a bunch of different metrics. So it'll check your mobility, your balance, your body shape, body weight, cognitive testing, and it'll put all that together and generate what your age should be. And then it'll also implement or suggest training programs to help you improve in certain areas where maybe you want to improve. What I think is really cool about it is it's an RFID system. So you've got the Technogym app, you can log in, you get into there, everything starts connecting, and then it starts connecting with some of your other equipment. So your cardio and your strength equipment also connect into there. That'll feed into your overall profile. And now you've got like your own personal trainer, and you're able to track your progress by just going down the hall from where you live with state-of-the-art equipment. We feel strongly, based off of feedback, that this is in Huntsville. A lot of the folks that are renting from us in Huntsville are young, single engineers. They care a lot about longevity. That is a huge deal to them. They want to be healthy. So we feel that between the desire to be healthy and this culture of connectivity, that this is a really good balance. It's a little on the expensive side right now, but I look forward to a few years down the road, this becomes a little bit more mainstream and hopefully can be implemented in not just Class A.
And I think with so many people having, whether it's an Apple Watch or Fitbit or something like that, being able to connect, it sounds like this helps bring that data to a more holistic view for residents to be on their personal app, to be able to track their progress.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other thoughts on fitness-focused, physical fitness-focused technology and activities?
Well, I love this. So when I look at this, I think it's really important to have give people access to biometric data. Again, another kind of anecdotal story. I live about a mile from Under Armour's global campus. They open up in their on-campus gym. They let a few people in the community join. I've been a member there for over 5 years. And so I kind of see some of the technology in there. But one of the things I think is kind of fun, especially like in a residence you described, is like you kind of have this kind of biometric data-driven technology in there. But one of the things they did in the Under Armour gym for the people that worked out there, they would just put up like a simple whiteboard by the like row machines or like one of the cardio, pieces of cardio equipment. And like in any given week, they would write down, here, do this workout, write down your name and like write down your time or your score, depending on the piece of equipment. So it just kind of fostered like some friendly fun, like competition.
Some gamification.
Some gamification, right? Like amongst, members of the gym or residents of the building. So just another way to like kind of, spice up the fitness experience, if you will. I tell you, I saw like in that picture, Matt, like a lot of different pieces of great equipment. That treadmill. So my wife recently, we just built a gym in our garage. My wife orders this treadmill. I don't really ask many questions about it. She just said, hey, I wanted a treadmill that has a little bit of incline and a built-in fan. I said, yeah, do whatever you want. I'm not going to get involved. So she orders this. It arrives one day. This was like a month ago. She said, hey, the treadmill's getting delivered this morning. I said, okay. I said, any idea what size the treadmill is or how much it weighs? She goes, no, I didn't look that up. I said, okay. So the guy gets there in the truck. The pallet is 832 pounds. And that thing is massive. She ordered a commercial treadmill that inclines up to 40 degrees. That has a built-in fan. It's a NordicTrack commercial. The screen is, we put it in our basement right in front of the TV. And the screen is so big you can't see the TV. But what you can do is subscribe to their, it's kind of like Peloton. You can kind of subscribe to their workouts, and it's pretty neat. So like on this treadmill, we can do hikes all over the world. If I want to hike, Denali National Park or, different North national parks throughout like the U.S. and Canada, and even like do hikes in Italy and France. It's almost like a virtual reality. Like we don't have the goggles on, but you're walking and the screen is so big. NordicTrack's done a really good job, like with their hiking tour guides and their cameras, where the treadmill, when you're walking, if you're walking up a hill, it will incline up. When you're walking down a hill, it'll decline down. If you're walking on a flat trail, it's flat, but it actually really makes you feel like you've left. I don't feel like when I'm doing it that I'm in my basement in Baltimore. I feel like I'm like out in nature. So it's just a totally different experience. And I think looking at some of these treadmills here, you could potentially offer, the same type thing. So there's just in a fitness room or a gym environment, there's so many different ways you can go that benefit residents. I think it's great.
I think we've kind of covered on the air quality, mold prevention, environmental wellness. Anything you want to add specifically on this slide, Jeff, or are we good on this?
No, like I said, everything is at your fingertips. It's just a matter of how are we implementing them, right? So obviously we talked about the humidity control, right? Anywhere from 40 to 60%. That can fluctuate based on, shower times and putting moisture into your units, which can cause, a ton of damage, from a building perspective. Leaving windows open and running the AC can obviously reduce the life expectancy of your, HVAC equipment. So there's a lot of different scenarios from that. But being able to be alerted, having your tenants and residents being aware via the thermostat, whether it's a smart thermostat or just on the screen, as you can see there, is an easy way to combat that, right? You talk about the air cleaners and filters, obviously in most scenarios. We do all those as well, right? Your standard 1-inch filter is only going to, give you a lower MERV rating. It's only going to be good for, 30 to 60 days, constantly have to be replaced, right? Why not go into a F200, a little bit thicker one that can be, cleaned on turns, get a little bit more life expectancy, get some of the pollen, the viruses, the bacteria, the smog, the smoke, right? So just little things like that can increase the quality of life within your buildings, right? And then obviously taking it a step further is obviously expanding on the ventilation within those units to create the perfect environment, right? We can obviously do it with exhaust fans and bath fans and et cetera, but there are other ventilation methods out there, which obviously cost more and whatnot, but taking it to that next level to accomplish what you're trying to do. And then obviously the thing that became more relevant during COVID is UV light, which is basically an air cleaner, air purifier that goes in the ductwork, right? So the air runs over it, it's reducing the bacteria, the viruses, the mold that can potentially sit in your HVAC equipment, obviously reducing the life expectancy, but it also can reduce any odors within the units themselves, right? So there's a ton of different features out there. And again, cost is always of concern, but if you're trying to kind of hit that next level of air quality and control within your units, there's many different things out there.
Every hospital in America has UV lights, in the commercial UV lights in their duct system. If you ever walk in a hospital, you'll think about it next time you do, because the air just feels cleaner in there. You can't see it; it's intangible, but hospital air tends to be really fresh and really clean, and part of that is the effectiveness of UV lights.
And I think there's certainly more awareness, particularly in shared spaces since the pandemic, of how is that air being treated. I have one of those little CO detectors that I use at the university to better understand, particularly when I had 45 university students in a room, which a bunch of them showing up even when they're sick. There's that awareness that we want to have good ventilation in those areas for sure.
Right. Yeah, student housing for sure, right, is something to, if anyone does that, I mean, we work with a fair amount of those folks as well, but it's definitely something that's being discussed, right? Just because if, you get a, either pandemic or flu outbreak, right? I mean, it can shut that whole complex down, and they got to clean it and disinfect it. And there's a lot of things sitting on, the back end that this could potentially prevent or help, mitigate, if you will.
Okay, transitioning to mental and emotional wellness, Matt, tell us what these are.
Sir, this is my favorite slide. So I'd say 4 or 5 years ago, decided to implement meditation rooms into our communities, both garden style and wrap. The picture on the left, I actually can't remember the manufacturer of that, but that is those are double doors that you open, and there's like a circle couch bed in the middle, and you just sit in there and disappear. And we've set that in the corner of the yoga room in a project in Santa Rosa Beach in Florida, just off 30A, and it's getting rave reviews. The one next to that is called the Soma Dome, and we've implemented that on a number of communities. This one on the right is in Knoxville, and we are doing an install right now on that same project I spoke about earlier in Huntsville. These are, from a design perspective, I love establishing these rooms, because when you have a building that's a square, you end up having these inboard little spaces that are typically used for storage. Maybe you can generate some revenue with storage cages or storage lockers or whatever, but it's pretty minimal. But you also, if you're implementing a meditation room, you want it quiet. You don't want natural light. You want to be able to go into a small enclosed space and feel like you're tuning the world out. So we have these extra spaces in all of our communities since we started developing 25 years ago. But now we have a really good use that we can explain to a resident that this is a really nice amenity that works with the design. So both of those applications are getting rave reviews from our residents, and it's going to continue to be one of the feature pieces of our communities moving forward.
Cody, tell us a little bit about this one and what you've seen developers doing.
Yeah, this is a very extreme example. Extreme example. But my brother texted me about this last week. So 3 things are important to me. My mom's from Texas. I was my middle name is Austin. I grew up a Longhorns fan for college football. However, I grew up in San Diego, was a beach kid, grew up surfing. And of course, I've told you guys about how important a sense of community is to me, and living in a village, a Sesame Street-like village that I've had for a long time throughout my 20s and 30s. So I get this text from my brother about this new development, this condo development about 15 miles east of downtown Austin called the Austin Surf Club. Kelly Slater, who's arguably the best surfer in the world, has been for a long time, is involved with this project. There was this huge, massive wave pool that he helped build back about 10 years ago that closed, and it's just sort of been sitting there. But they're redeveloping the site, hundreds of condos going in, there's a brewery going in, there's a restaurant going in, and there's this giant wave park. There's actually 2 wave parks. So there's one wave park that's sort of for beginning level surfers, and then there's another one for more intermediate and advanced level surfers. And it's actually this track that moves in and under the water to generate like an artificial reef, as you can kind of see here. So these guys are actually surfing long waves, that are overhead, and they actually can get barreled and all that. And I thought, this is awesome. Like, I can move here. I got my sense of community. I can surf every day. I can be in Austin, Texas, and watch my Longhorns in the fall. I told my wife, I said, it's here. This is the place. We're moving. So next slide, I email the guy, and this was the pricing. I crashed down to earth, right? The guy says, yeah, real estate starts in the mid-2s for the land, but you can purchase a surf membership. The going rate is currently 1.1, and all my dreams came crashing down. I won't be moving there. But the reason I tell this story, right, is like, this is again a very extreme example, but like there's people out there that are willing to pay for this experience. There are people out there that are willing to, go to this community and pay $1 million for a membership to surf an artificial fake wave. There's people that are willing to pay $2.5 million for a condo 10 miles east of Austin Airport, probably in the middle of nowhere, just because it establishes a sense of community where they can, ride waves and pretend like they're in the South Pacific in the middle of Texas. So I use this extreme example because I think in multifamily, and Matt's talked a lot about today, you can use experiences to drive health and drive wellness. And I think it's also lends the opportunity to generate additional income. If you make your building like a destination, there's all kinds of other revenue opportunities, right? Not only just to create this awesome experience for your residents, but like on the ground level, if you can add, things like restaurants, breweries. We have a building down the street from our house. They have this really cool kind of indoor-outdoor atrium, and the building actually rents it out to the public for things like bridal showers and baby showers and birthday parties and things like that. And it's just this really cool all glass space. When you go outside, it kind of opens up, and the really cool plants and landscaping and all that. So thinking about ways to create your building into a destination, not only to attract your residents, but outsiders, and find ways to generate more income. If you start adding some of the other things we've talked about today, like, pickleball courts or, bike rentals or whatever, there might be all these like cool ways to monetize and pay for your investment into health and wellness topics.
And this is a repeat slide from our outdoor spaces session. Just saying that if you have that space built into your community, these are the types of activities you can implement in order to promote that community, the belonging, the social well-being. Another example, I think this comes from yours.
Yeah, so I wanted to touch on how important design is to these spaces. Like you don't accidentally get a socially healthy community. That starts pretty much day one of design. So these pictures are from our Knoxville project that finished up a couple years ago, just kind of showing how we try to balance, main clubroom space as much as indoor outdoor as we can get it. And so that would allow us to do, and did allow us to do, a really successful grand opening of the property. And then if we have other large events that we can have, 100 people attend, it's great. But like I already talked about, we need to balance that macro scale with a more micro scale. So it's all about balance. Social well-being is not how many people can you get in one room and have them all talk to each other, because as we already mentioned, half of them probably don't want to do that. But there are smaller circles that maybe they do. So we design our small spaces. I put these up here just so you could see what we've done with the laundry lounge. This is a new idea that one of our partners had asked us to investigate if it would be successful. So we implemented it in our Huntsville property. The idea here is that folks who go camping or skiing, they'll come back with a lot of, jackets, clothes, more maybe than they can do in their unit. So we've created a laundry space for them to do their laundry, but it also means that they're going to be there for a certain amount of time. So we created a lounge. So if you have multiple folks who want to just hang out at the laundry lounge, that's a thing that they can do. And then this is our maker space. So in urban multifamily, you can be living in a unit that's 600, 700 square feet, and you'd be comfortable, but there's a lot of stuff you can't do in a unit that size. And I think we don't want to have our residents feel restricted in what hobbies they can pursue. So we like to provide amenities that allow them to pursue things like arts and crafts. We call it arts and crafts, but any sort of activity or building that they want to do, they can go to this area called the makerspace, and then we have one down the hall called the lending room. We can lend out tools so that they can use them in the makerspace, so folks can pursue whatever hobbies they want and not feel restricted by the fact that they live in a 700 square foot apartment.
The next section we're going to talk about ties back into this morning when we're talking about security and safety, that contributes to wellness and mental wellness, to feel like I'm in a place where I'm safe and I'm not worried. So as you talk about access control and environmental safety systems, how can that support mental wellness and peace of mind? Matt or Jeff?
Well, I beat the horse again on balance, right? So you absolutely need a resident to feel safe. It was in one of the first slides that's a non-negotiable on wellness, but there's a point where that can go too far, and you can feel like if you have to pass through 3 or 4 access control systems to get to your unit, then it starts to feel a little bit more like, it doesn't feel like a home. We'll say that. So the balance is, how do you make sure that your resident feels safe, but minimize the amount of times they have to pass through an access controlled space so that they feel like they are going home, not into the next phase of this building. So we make conscious decisions on things like, you walk into our community from the front door. It's got the main intercom, it's got access control. You walk in, but once you're in, the doorway from the club room to the corridor, we consciously don't put access control on that door. The elevator's right on the other side of that door. We consciously decide not to put access control on the elevators because we don't want our residents to wonder, why is there access control on the elevator? Somebody had to fob to get into this building. So that's kind of an example of where we try to find the balance on safety and security, but also making it still feel like a home.
Yeah, I think he nailed it, right? I think it's what is the balance of really creating that sense of safety and security without overdoing it, right? Because if you do it and it's Fort Knox, they're like, oh my God, like now I have to have a key, I have to have a fob, I have to have this. Can I just move around freely, right? I'm paying the rent, I'm in the building, I'm validated, et cetera, right? So being able to limit that, but more importantly, even from the building side is okay, how do you take that smart technology to the next level, right? So rekeying doors, handing out new fobs, obviously you can charge for those, but do people really want to carry those? Looking at mobile credentials, right? Which is a little bit easier. Everybody has their phone with them. So if you do want to take it to that next level and really lock out different areas and, I guess make it more secure and have audit trails of who's going into, say the tool room or the market or whatever, taking it to that next smart level of having your mobile credential being in that versus having to carry all this stuff around, et cetera. But yeah, I would agree with Matt on that, right? It's just, let's limit that. Let's be conscious. Let's make sure we have the audit trail. Let's make sure that they feel secure, but let's not make them feel like they're being watched every corner they turn, if you will.
So as we wrap things up, one sentence that you would say to this audience when it comes to health and wellness, what would be your advice to them?
Got a lot of topics today. I would just encourage you to focus on your target market, understand what kind of person is looking at your building, and find ways to help them live a well, happy, healthy life across that kind of the hierarchy or pillars that I talked about.
Yeah, I would just say more VOC, right? Take your target market to expand from what Cody said. Take your target market and do VOC sessions within those communities, right? And it may not change that current community, but the next one you build or you're looking at can change, right? And it doesn't have to be big expenses by any means, but at the same time, you're vetting out the people that are living there and hopefully going to continue to pay those rents, for example, and live there a long time. But nonetheless, it makes them feel like they're wanted and needed and have a voice in kind of what's coming next, or if they are going to do a renovation, or if you are building a new project, right? Like, hey, what is that next best thing that they feel is needed? We all have our own opinions, right? They're going to have their own opinion as well. And if you bring them in on the front end, they're going to be like, oh, this is an awesome developer, awesome company, awesome property management company that I want to be a part of.
Yeah, I would say just a reminder that we haven't arrived. I think that there's more work that we can do as far as innovation to establish physical, mental, social wellness. For example, we didn't talk at all about diet. And I think this is a tech conference. I can't help but think that there's got to be some application where we can foster, with the use of tech, a more diet conscious resident experience. Can't tell you what that is yet. Haven't put enough thought into it, but I would encourage everybody to think innovatively about how we can continue to foster wellness in multifamily.
Well, thank you. Yes, Jacques.
I'm glad you mentioned that because retention is there's a phenomenon going on right now. Retention is very high, but just across the street, you can get a rent that's lower and get 2 or 3 months free. So naturally, you would think everybody would jump at that. They're not. And we wonder why. And I think it's this. I think it's health and wellness. I think that folks have gotten so comfortable and honestly addicted to the network that they have in their community that they feel like they're in that community, that's their family. And that equates to a real dollar value. Sometimes 2 or 3 months of rent is the dollar value. So I think we absolutely need to continue leaning in on this. And I listen to Jay Parsons on the rent roll. He talks about it all the time. Like he was totally wrong. He thought that retention was going to tank. It's gone up. And I think it's because our communities are so focused post-COVID on achieving these goals. We
appreciate you all being here. Safe travels back home, and we hope to see you again sometime in the future. Thanks, everyone. Give me a round of applause for our panelists here.